to her heart. You can say that. So kneel down, kneel on your knees, okay?
Just testing my audio. Can you give me a signal that you can hear me? Thank you. Good evening. It's just after 7 o'clock. It's July 1st, officially the second half of 2020. And it's going to be an interesting ride, just like the first half has been in Fort Bend ISD. And I want to thank you for joining us this evening. We've got quite a few things to talk to you about this evening, all related to our district response to COVID-19 pandemic. And I want to thank you for encouraging us to do an event like this. I'm so thankful for the partnerships we have in our community, for all the moms and dads and staff members who consistently provide us feedback and show appreciation for our team's efforts to keep you well informed. And I'm thankful to work with an outstanding team in our communications and technology department that put events like this together. One of the rules of communication is to tell them 7 times in 7 different ways. So we're taking a little different approach this evening. And I'm going to go ahead now and let you know I have with me on the screen our Deputy Superintendent, Deanna Saavedra. In a little while, you're going to hear more from her as we answer many questions. Our goal for this evening is twofold. First of all, we want to provide you a good update on where we are. That'll be the brief part of the presentation. And then we want to spend the majority of our time together responding to your questions. We've had over 500 questions submitted in advance, and that was our goal. You are also welcome to submit them in the chat feature on YouTube as you're watching, and those will be fed to us via the Zoom chat, so we'll be able to engage with other questions in real time. But what you're going to find as we get to the questions is even though there were over 500, the vast majority of them fall into a very few categories. And I'm going to review that in a few minutes. So for now, what I'd like to do though is go ahead and take a minute and share my screen with you so that you can see a PowerPoint presentation. And that we'll go through this briefly because we want to get to your questions. We know that's what's on your mind. But as we go through the PowerPoint, I want to make sure that you have a full appreciation and understanding of how we're making decisions in Fort Bend ISD as well. So right now you should be seeing the opening slide, and you can see our new brand for the coming second half of this year is FBISD Reimagined. And that is for real. One of the things we've talked about in Fort Bend in our boardroom with our board, as well as with our staff, is that there is no going back to how things once were. As we plan this new year, and truly every year after this, we will be reimagining how we do education. We have learned so many valuable things during the couple of months that we did online learning that we're going to build on going forward, and life in Fort Bend will never be the same. We're truly transforming our students' educational experience. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about who we are, where we are as an organization, our planning efforts, next steps, questions and answers, and then we'll draw to a close. As we begin, I want to make sure you have a full understanding that I am not going to introduce or announce any new plans this evening. We're going to revisit some of the plans we've discussed publicly with the board, and I'm going to share data with you about the recent survey many of you completed, thousands of you completed, so that you can have an appreciation of the data we're using to make decisions as we finalize our plans. The other thing, the reason we're visiting with you tonight is we want to make sure that we're helping to manage expectations. We're living in a time of great uncertainty, and you know that, and I can tell from the number of questions you ask. And I regret that I'm not going to be able to answer a lot of those questions tonight, or even really within the next several weeks. We're answering as many as we can in real time, but the reality is things are changing almost daily as the number of cases continue to rise in our community and in our state, as new information comes from TEA, Texas Education Agency, and as new information comes from the CDC. So, all right, I want to help you manage expectations, and we're always going to keep you informed. We're always going to be transparent and give you insight into our thinking as we make plans. And I also want to let you know how we're using this available data to make decisions. So tonight's a brief update, then we're going to get into the questions. As we begin, I think it's so important to always come back to the foundation of our work in Fort Bend. Back in 2012, our Board of Trustees adopted core beliefs and commitments to govern our work in this district. And I want you to know these core beliefs and commitments still stand today. For 7 years, I worked with the board to bring these things to life for our students. And even now, under these unique circumstances, these core beliefs and commitments, these district goals still drive our work. So when you see a phrase like all students can achieve their full potential, and that we will provide an educational system that will enable all students to reach their full potential, that means even with the pandemic and our response to these strange times, we are still going to have systems in place to make sure our students achieve their full potential. We expect you to hold us accountable for that. Our school board holds us accountable for that. And together, we are committed to making sure that we achieve these goals on behalf of our students. We want to have an equitable learning environment for our student. So tonight, as you hear me discuss some of these items, and in the future, as you hear more plans about the specific details, please know that we're operating from a place of equity, which is very different from equal. What equity means is that each student and each community will have what they need to meet their unique needs. So that is our goal. As I look at goal 2, I see that we have for several months now been operating in a place where students have been required to own their education. And that's one of our goals in Fort Bend, is that students will be responsible for and own their learning, behavior, and progress through the curriculum. So I could talk through each of these goals, but I'm not right now. I just want you to know that this work, our strategic plan, continues to drive our work. As we move forward tonight, I want to talk about 5 key areas, and all of the questions you've asked us also fall into these areas. The things we're looking at right now relate to instructional expectations, safety protocols, social emotional supports, operational systems, and the school calendar and personnel. We've previously announced some commitments that I just wanted to reinforce tonight. When I think about instructional expectations, I'm going to reinforce the idea that all students will have equitable access to learning and supports. We're going to work hard to meet the needs of each unique student. I also want to reinforce that fine arts, PE, athletics, and all the other co and extracurricular activities such as PALS and the leadership program for our students, all of those things will be part of our learning models as we move forward. We're not going to cast those things aside and just focus on the core. Our students continue to need and will be provided a full, well-rounded education that helps bring to life our profile of a graduate. Safety protocols are essential. Student and staff health and well-being are our highest priority and will continue to be our highest priority. That includes safety protocols, infection control, social distancing, and PPE that might be required in our workplace. Social emotional supports will also be addressed in all that we do. We're going to be consistently attending to the needs of our students who might be under stress or feeling pressure or anxiety about what's happening in the world around them, about their learning experiences. We want to be in tune with that to provide them the uplift, the encouragement, the support they need, the mental toughness and grit to stay strong and move forward persistently. We know that this is especially important because we have members of our community that have died. And our students know individuals. Many of our students have been connected to family members or friends who have faced and struggled with this virus, some surviving, some not. So we know our students have a great deal on their minds right now. And our teachers are excellent engaging with our students to help support them in the social emotional domains. And we want them to feel safe and be safe in their learning environment, whether it's online or at home. When it comes to operational systems, technology comes to the forefront of our thinking, and we're going to be sure that all students have access to technology, devices, and hotspots. But there's also many other operational systems, such as transportation, the building organization, how we use our spaces. And so there are many aspects of those logistics that will have to be addressed even within the weeks and days before school begins. But again, we're going to keep you informed on those things because in the end, they do have an impact on what our instructional program looks like. When we think about the school calendar and personnel, transition and flexibility are essential. We've had a calendar committee meeting 3 times in the last week, and our calendar committee has done an excellent job of coming up with some important revisions to the calendar that we're going to discuss with our school board in a meeting on Monday, the 13th of July. So I'm not going to get into those details tonight. We're going to announce that first at the July 13th board meeting, when the board will consider action on a revised calendar. But I will assure you that the first day of school still stands at August 12th. But when it comes to the calendar and personnel, though, it is critical that you understand there may be closures throughout the year, either we're at a campus, in a classroom, or district-wide, based on local community outbreak or spread of the COVID virus. But again, as we mentioned with students, we also want to make sure our staff feel comfortable returning to work in whatever form that may be, whether it's to perform online learning services for students, or in our business district offices, or to provide face-to-face instructions in the classroom. We are dedicated to protecting all of our staff and keeping them safe from exposure. So as we move through the planning, this is the thing these are the 3 elements I want you to understand. The key considerations that are at the foundation of all our planning are equity for all students, as I've mentioned, health and safety for staff and students, childcare impact. We know that many parents will be returning to work, and in 2-income homes, that's a big deal. You may not have flexibility. So we're trying to put plans in place that will allow the schools to help maintain stability in your home and help support you if you have to return to work. So we're considering many options to the school day that would support you, including our extended learning program and how they might provide additional childcare supports. Again, many more details will be forthcoming there. But we're also looking carefully at logistical complexity of putting the whole plan together. When we think of lessons learned, this is where we go back to the various feedback you've given us from our spring's effort to do online learning. So we know that we're going to have to address the courses and the number of minutes students are engaged with. So much of the feedback we've heard from parents is that we need a rigorous education and we need more time in the classroom. So I want you to know the fall experience will look dramatically different from the spring. There will be direct learning face-to-face in a classroom for many students, but there'll also be direct teaching and learning online, where students might sit in a class for an hour on their computer, engaging directly with the teacher and other students. That will be a change from the spring. We're also going to have change. We're refining our expectations of how we use Schoology in the district as well. We heard from many students and their parents that not all of our teachers use Schoology in the same way. So we're going to have standard expectations that all students will have a common experience and how Schoology will be used going forward. And of course, that applies to all of our online tools, whether it be Zoom, Teams, or other tools. There's some new tools we will be introducing, but we're going to have standard practices in place for how all teachers in all classrooms in all schools use those tools to improve the overall learning experience for all of our students. The other piece that's critical, as I've referenced briefly, is increased access to live instruction. TEA guidelines have indicated for funding, students have to have so many hours of live instruction each week. And that's going to be a big part of our plan. So again, you can expect major changes in that area. I do think it's important to note, though, especially if you have a younger learner, a child that's in pre-K through 2nd grade, our TEA and our own Commissioner of Education, who has young children himself, fully supports the fact that our youngest learners do not need to be in front of a computer for hours and hours each day. So there will be a more flexible learning environment for the youngest students, where they will not be required to sit in front of the computer for hours, but they will still be expected to progress through their work and do schoolwork on a daily basis, as all students will be expected to engage in work every day. Grading and improved progress monitoring will be another major shift. We will have full grading, full rigor, full progress toward mastery in each of our classes, including tutorials and interventions. So full grading will be in place. In most ways, what you can expect is this is going to look like a typical school year. Only only learning will be conducted in different ways using online tools and resources for many of our students. And it's not optional. Compulsory attendance laws and rules are in place from the state level and locally. This means truancy, attendance, all of those things will be carefully monitored and counted. And I'm going to answer some questions about that later, but everybody needs to hear and fully appreciate the fact that it's not, learning is not optional and participation is not optional from the state mandates. Now, the other thing that I want to get into is research and feedback. We have been working with national organizations who have conducted significant international research to help guide our planning. But we've also listened to our own students, parents, and teachers in the district, as I'm going to show you in a minute. But we're talking, I'm regularly meeting with other districts and TEA, along with the national research I've mentioned. But I also want you to feel comforted that we are engaging with our own Dr. Jackie Mentor, the Fort Bend County Director of Health and Human Services, as well as 3 specialists from Methodist Sugar Land. These are all folks who work in emergency, critical care, and infectious disease. And we have a small advisory team of physicians that are helping us put all of our guidelines in place. And I'm very proud of them and their efforts and the investment they're making in their community. Of course, their primary guidance to us has been based on CDC guidance. So they've been very firm that we must follow the CDC guidance. But the most important thing I want you to appreciate is their experience is guiding us toward putting infection control measures in place in our schools that will be comparable to what you experience in a local hospital. And so that's what our goal is, to keep every single person in the learning environment safe and secure as we move through this season. So let's talk a little bit about the feedback we've received. I want you to know that the data I'm about to show you is based on a recent survey. It's important that you also know that survey was administered in early June, before we began to see a dramatic increase in the number of diagnosed cases and hospitalizations. We are going to take another survey in July before we finalize everything, because we need to know how our community feels under the current, even more current circumstances. This is another reason I keep reminding you to think flexibly about where we are. But if the other thing I want you to know is we had nearly 18,000 parents take the survey, nearly 7,000 students took the survey, and about 4,500 staff members took the survey. We have also had thousands of staff members and parents and students involved in focus groups that we've conducted virtually to also get feedback. This information I'm about to share, though, came from the survey that was administered in our community within the last month. In regard to health concerns, when asked how concerned individuals are about their household being impacted by COVID-19, 85% said they are very concerned or somewhat concerned. They're in that level of concern, with 54% being very concerned. How concerned are you about an elevated risk of a member in your household? 37% indicated that they had someone in their household with an elevated risk that they would be concerned about. When asked how seriously they think most people are taking the COVID-19 CDC guidelines, 50% said not seriously enough. Only 11% said too seriously, and then 39% said just the right amount. When we ask about returning to school, if we ask, are you evaluating other educational options, about 21% of our parents indicated that they are. And I want you to appreciate, as superintendent of this district, my goal, and one of the reasons we're having this conversation tonight, is I want you to stay in Fort Bend ISD. I want you to think completely through any decision you might make about seeking other options. If we have tended to your child's needs to this point successfully, I would not be worried about what's about to happen this fall. We are going to be very well prepared, and we will meet your child's needs in the best way possible to the best of our ability. And I also want you to appreciate the fact that the obstacles it can create if you decide to homeschool on your own or do other options for a year or so and then bring them back to Fort Bend, because that will be a break in our system that could be detrimental to their long-term learning and engagement in the system. So I just encourage you to think deeply and continue to work with us to help meet your needs. We're going to have so many available options, and our staff is dedicated to meeting the needs of your children. I want that 21% to shrink dramatically by the time the first day of school comes. That's my encouragement to you and why we're working so hard to really put on a high quality learning experience even online this fall. When asked how schools should reopen, 19% as normal as possible. And honestly, that's my goal, even though I know that's not the reality. But 45% said it should, with changes, they should reopen with changes to lower the risk of transmission. And then 36% said online only until COVID-19 is over. That's a risky proposition, though, because we're not sure when we're going to not be dealing with this virus. It clearly is something that all the healthcare providers are telling us we're going to be dealing with this for some time. So that's why, again, we're looking for solutions that help to meet the needs of all members of our community based wherever they may fall in their belief system on this topic. So when we ask about safety measures, you can see by all the extended red bars, when you ask, do you support the following safety measures? All of these measures, everything from alerts on new cases, cleaning protocols, temperature checks, weekly check-ins, keeping students in the same room, restricting high-risk activities, face masks, all of these things were heavily supported by our community. All of them, I believe, over 50%. So these are all measures we're considering as we determine how to open school. Now, here's the last slide on this particular bit of information. When asked how comfortable you are sending your child to school, if conditions are the same as today, we only had 43% say that they are very comfortable or somewhat comfortable. 52% were not comfortable or not at all comfortable. But if you look to the right, on the other slide, when you ask if the district were to take the measures you supported most, how comfortable are you today with sending your child back to school in the fall? 66% said they are comfortable if we have protective measures in place, and the uncomfortable drops to 31%. We asked the same question of our staff. How comfortable are you returning to school for work if conditions are the same as today? And only 49% said they're comfortable. 47% said they are not comfortable. And just like the parents and students, when we ask if we put safety measures in place, the comfort level increases to 68%, and the non-comfortable drops to 28%. This is a critical piece that we all need to keep in mind. And as you evaluate and our decisions that we announce later in July, I want you to keep in mind that everything we do is dependent on a strong, healthy, robust staff. If our staff is operating in fear and it causes them to take leave, retire, resign, that is detrimental to our functioning and our ability to serve our students. We get that. We appreciate that. And we are going to do anything and everything we can to keep our staff healthy and able to deliver services. We know that can impact our children's educational experience. That means we may have to do more online than we want based on the teacher's ability and desires to feel safe. So just know, though, I want our staff listening tonight to know that your health and well-being is not being sacrificed just to reopen schools. We are keeping you at the forefront of our thinking, just as we are the students, because we know we can't open school and serve our students without our staff's full support. I want to shift our focus to online learning. Because you have given us a great deal of feedback in email and Let's Talk, but this was beneficial to us When we asked did guardians or parents spend above average amounts of time helping a child, you can see at the elementary level, the answer is very high. Yes, they did. But as you transition to more mature, independent children, 73% of our high school parents said no. Children were able to do it much more on their own. When we ask about difficulty guiding their child through the lessons, you can see 58% said no at the elementary, 65% said no at the middle, and 75% said no at the high school. So generally, based on this question, parents did not express a great deal of difficulty. Although I will tell you, based on email and Let's Talk concerns, we know that there have been frustration and confusion among many of our parents in navigating our various online resources, which is again why we're going to bring a revitalized expectations to that effort. When we asked, did a guardian have enough help from child's teacher in school? Overwhelmingly, the answer was enough. So that was a positive step, that at all grade levels, the parents felt like the child's teachers were helpful. And that's not surprising because we have the best teachers in this area and in the state. They were all throughout the spring dedicated to helping our students remain successful. But as we look at all of these slides, we are aware, as I mentioned numerous times, of the improvements that are necessary. When we ask our students about their online learning experiences, we had a great deal of our students, between 17% said that their motivation was extremely negatively impacted by the move to online learning. 25% said negative. That's a significant portion of our students, and that's disappointing because we know how hard it was for our students, and it's challenging enough being a student today, let alone feeling your motivation drawn down because of an experience beyond your control. So this is where our social emotional learning is so critical. We want to make sure that we're supporting these kids, and parents, we're counting on you to partner with us in that too, to help our kids stay motivated. Some of the more granular data we picked up from our students revealed that one of the most concerning aspects of the online experience to our students was not being able to connect socially with their friends. And I think one thing we've learned, I've personally observed, is we think our kids live on social media, but I think that this pandemic has revealed just how essential the personal relationships, the face-to-face engagements they enjoy with their students, how important those things are to them. So we want to do everything we can to help our students stay positive and move forward in a productive, healthy way during this pandemic. What kind of impact has the move to online learning had on your own learning? Our students reported 39% felt like they were falling behind. And again, I'm going to be honest, that doesn't surprise me because our spring learning and teaching was not a robust learning environment. As you'll recall, we consistently said, do your best, and it's not going to be perfect, it's going to be good. And we got by because we all put it together as quickly as we could. We were all learning on the fly. But as we go forward, we're going to be very well prepared to make sure students are consistently progressing and advancing in their learning. So with that in mind, you heard us back in, I guess, May. We shared with our school board and did a video, publicly announced 3 learning models that we were considering. The models have not changed. What has changed at this point, though, is the state has given us official notice of how they plan to fund us for schools. So I want you to understand that we're going to definitely have face-to-face. We are definitely going to have online. However, the hybrid learning model that we previously discussed will be a fallback alternate position in the event we do not have physical space in a building to serve all kids full time. So I'm going to tell you there will be places in the district where students can go to school face-to-face all day, every day, because many other students have chosen to learn online 100% of the time. There'll be other places where there's a balance at a campus. And so there may be students that are asked to split a schedule or come to school on alternating days. This is when we have more information from you as our parents and members of our community. We'll be able to make some of these decisions a little later in the game. And I'm going to talk to you about that process in just a little bit more. But I want you to understand that right now, the state has agreed to fund us for all face-to-face instruction in the usual way. They have also agreed to fund us for online instruction, just as if a student is in the classroom, if the student engages in a set number of hours of learning. That number eludes me as I'm talking to you right now, but I think it's 3 hours a day, 3 or 4 hours a day that a student would have to be online in direct engagement with their teacher and then doing their other assignments and work outside of that time. We will receive the same type and level of funding if that occurs. Now, in a hybrid model where a student comes to school face to face on one day, we would receive regular funding. If they're at home learning for a day or two a week and they're not having direct instruction with their teacher, they would still have to show progress through our online resources we will have to see demonstration of their work in the system and prove that to TEA to be able to receive funding. Excuse me. So that's a critical piece that will drive how we schedule and do our work around these various options. But again, our goal is to get students in front of a teacher face to face, whether it's online or in a classroom, as much as possible. To make this happen, and one thing what you're going to find, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in a minute. Excuse me, I'm going to, let's see, got a cough. Excuse me. So what you're going to find when we come back on the 13th, I'm going to go over the detailed calendar in a minute, but we're going to at some point in late July begin a pre-registration where after we have shared all the details and parents have all the information they need to make a good decision, we will ask parents to declare if they're going to do face-to-face learning or online learning. And then they will be asked to stick with that decision for at least the first 9-week grading cycle and maybe the first semester, but at a minimum it will be the first 9-week grading cycle. Once parents have registered their child for face-to-face and online, then we will know how to set up our classrooms in our buildings and what space will be required. And at that point, we will be able to know if we're going to be able to serve all the students at one time in the building that want to come to school for face-to-face, or whether some will need to learn at home so we can optimize our space for face-to-face learning and engage some students in hybrid learning. Again, all of those details will be spelled out, but I want you to have a general overview of what the next several weeks will look like and include as we come back to you with and need more information from you as parents. Last thing I want to hit on before we get to our questions is the calendar. As I mentioned earlier, our calendar committee has met. We have a proposal we're going to be taking to the board on July 13th. First day of school will still be the 12th, but there are some significant modifications that add some more holidays, intervention days. There's something called an an intercession period, and a brief extension of the year to the last day of school will be a little later than originally approved, is what we're shooting for at this time. Again, many more details to come the week of July 13th. But I want you to know that any calendar adjustment is intended to address equity in education for all students. It's intended to make sure that all students have instructional supports in place, that we have maximum flexibility, because we know we are going to have localized and regionalized outbreaks and growth of the COVID virus. And of course, the calendar also includes time for teacher planning and preparation to make sure they're well prepared to serve all the students. So tonight we wanted to send everybody into the 4th of July weekend and 4th of July holiday next week with the most current information available. On Monday, the 13th, when the district reopens, we'll begin with the board meeting where we're going to lay out many more details about our planning for fall. And then we will, at that same time, we'll seek board approval of the modified calendar. That same week on July 15th, we'll have another live event to go over all that detail for our entire community. We'll lay out the instructional framework that week, all of our logistics and planning, and then we'll begin engaging all of our leaders in learning to execute and lead through this period. The week of July 27th, we will begin pre-registration. We'll ask all parents during that week to register their children, and as I mentioned, declare online learning or face-to-face learning. And then the week of the 3rd of August, teachers will begin returning to work for professional development, and we'll begin educating all teachers in our infection control protocols, expectations around using online tools for learning and logistics. And then of course, our leaders will also continue their learning and leading through our staff into this new season. And on August 12th, school will begin. So there's a lot to do in the next 45 days. But I'm excited to work with the team in Fort Bend ISD. As I often say, we're aligned from the boardroom to the classroom. And so I'm so thankful to work with the board that has been so supportive, taking important actions at just the right time to help advance our work. And of course, an executive team in central office, principals, and every staff member, teachers, and every single person at the campus, even our registrars and clerks that have all been and will continue to work very hard to make sure we are ready to receive your student for the new school year. So with that in mind, I'm going to transition to the questions and answers. You can see that they fall into 5 categories: health and safety, instruction, special student populations, fine arts and athletics, staff, and teacher concerns. So I'm going to transition back there. I think at this point you should be able to see both Deanna and I on the screen. So let's get right into the questions. And I'm going to answer several, then I'll toss a few to Deanna, but she's certainly going to feel free to jump in as needed to help make sure I'm not messing anything up. So first question comes from Melody S., a parent in our district. If we are able to send our children back to school, will masks be required? So that's a great question, and that's one of the most asked questions we're receiving right now, Melody. And so I want you to, again, as I've already mentioned, we are working with the medical advisory team, and we're going to have full infection control measures in place. Most certainly, they will include masks at some points of the day. They will probably include face shields for many of our students and staff, as those have been proven to be very effective. And of course, we will also be addressing social distancing and class sizes all in the same time in those infection control protocols. You can also expect that temperature taking will be part of it. There'll probably be some form of parent wellness checks that we ask the parent to verify their students' health conditions if they're showing any symptoms on a periodic basis. So it will be a very robust infection control process that we have in place in our schools. And I want you to also understand, well, here, one of the questions we received is, how are you going to ensure that teachers and students will be protected with safety measures? So the answer is this: education, education, education. Well, we're going to be beginning, even in the very near future, an education campaign about health and safety protocols. And really, it comes down to the basic things we're hearing. Our healthcare providers all reinforced for us the same things we keep hearing about: washing your hands, keeping a distance from others, and protecting yourself by wearing a mask. It's really very simple, but doing it in a school with hundreds of children and many, many staff, we have to have it well orchestrated. So all of these things with masks, social distancing, how our classes will be used, that will all be part of a protocol that we will be educating and informing our staff. And I want to be honest, we're going to also be staging reentry into our facilities. For example, even when teachers come back, they'll have to go through very careful training before they engage with other teachers in the building, to make sure that they're protecting themselves and others. We will probably not bring all the students back into the building face to face. We will probably stage them a grade level or a group at a time to make sure everybody is protected while our students and staff learn those protocols. So a lot of thought and care is being put to this. One individual asked if class sizes would be reduced. The answer is, to a point. One of the interesting things about this is the CDC, there is guidance provided on the number of square foot you should have in a classroom per person. So based on the school you attend, the class sizes may vary. Many of our schools over the 60-year history of this district, our older schools have smaller classrooms. And that means if we allocate, the number of students to square foot, we're going to have smaller classes there. But if we have the larger, more modern schools with a larger classroom, they may be able to have more students. So there's not going to be a standard across the district, but there will be a square footage allocation per student. So again, to summarize all of this about our safety protocols, the mask, all of those things, please know that we are going to have all of that very well defined and communicated to all of you, parents and staff. LS, another parent and guardian, asked, will teachers and students be required to have a COVID-19 test prior to attending classes? Will the schools take temperatures prior to entering the schools? We have a grandparent living with us with COPD. We're very concerned about in-person classes and the possibility of contracting. So online classes will be available for students who have great concern if their parents think that's best for them. At this time, again, we don't know what the specific protocols will be, but what we do know is that testing just for the sake of testing before entering a school or work has not been recommended by the CDC. It's not been proven to be beneficial if a person is not symptomatic or believed to have been exposed. So at this point, we do not expect to do that. But again, this is all subject to change. But right now, just you need to know we're going to be communicating all this data to you, so you'll be able to make the best decision for your family at the appropriate time. When we get to instruction, is there an option to attend school online? Yes, there will be. So, but then Christy, one of our parents, says, what will online learning look like in the fall? Will it be the same as it was at the end of the last school year, or will it be more engaging, more robust? Will you be using an existing online program such as Texas Connections Academy or UTHS? Deanna, as our deputy and overseer of our curriculum and instruction, I'll ask you to take that question, please.
Thank you, Dr. Dupree. And what I'd like to share is and reiterate is something that Dr. Dupree mentioned earlier when he was working through some of the information, and that is that our online learning platform will look very different. We've listened to you as stakeholders. We've listened to our teachers in terms of any impediments that they may have had in delivery of instruction. And we've certainly listened to our students in terms of what is important to them as they are working through their learning and what's important to them in a learning environment. So what I will say is that we will be engaged in synchronous and asynchronous learning. And you've heard those terms before. The difference is that we have robust tools, as Dr. Dupree said, that will allow us to offer live synchronous learning for students scheduled daily. So the level of flexibility will decrease because we want the synchronous learning live with the teacher, with students in the classroom, scheduled daily. Asynchronous opportunities for students to do independent practice or access video content for reinforcement will also be available. All courses will be required of students. If you recall, in the spring, we focused heavily on the content, and some of the out classes and the elective courses were optional. Moving forward, all courses will be required, and we'll be tracking engagement and grades for all courses. And of course, a big piece of that, as Dr. Dupree mentioned, is that we are clearly communicating expectations in terms of the use of the Schoology platform. Something that we heard from our students is that the organization of content on the Schoology platform, if it's consistent from course to course or from teacher to teacher, that certainly allows them to navigate the system with much more ease. So those are some major improvements that we'll be making with our online instructional platform.
Thank you, Deanna. So Janet D asked us, when is the deadline to enroll a child for online classes? Additionally, if a parent enrolls a child for online courses or in-person classes, will a parent have the option to change the setting at any point during the school year? So again, the pre-registration, that enrollment will be July 27th. That's when that date will begin. And as I mentioned, yes, we will ask parents to commit to at least 9 weeks. and maybe 18 weeks, the whole fall semester. We are still working through that detail, but it will at a minimum be the first 9-week grading cycle of the school year would be what we would ask you to commit to. Let's see, if we go back to school face-to-face and or a hybrid, and one person at a school contracts the COVID-19 virus, will the school or will the whole classroom have to quarantine? Once again, this will be addressed through our safety and health protocols that we're putting in place with our medical advisory team, because what we're finding is there may be, based on the amount of exposure that individuals had, there may be a classroom of students and a few adults that have to go home for quarantine for a couple of weeks, or there may be a wing of a building, or maybe a whole school has to shut down. So again, there's going to be a flow chart, if you will, that guides us through that decision making, and we're going to be working carefully with our healthcare professionals to develop that flow chart, so we will be able to communicate to you, our parents, what that protocol is well before the school year begins. Another question is, will absences be counted against students if we go back to classrooms? If a student gets COVID-19, they will be out for 14 days. So this is an interesting change that has come from the TEA. What they've told us, well, let me go back. In a typical school year, as you know, if a child has the flu and they're out sick, they're counted absence from school. It may be an excused absence, but they're still absent. And we help with makeup work and those kinds of things. In this case, though, TEA is allowing us that if a student is sick with the virus, because we have online learning taking place, as long as the student can engage in school from home for the proper amount of time, and that's important, for the required number of hours or making the required progress, then we will still be able to count them present and they will not be counted absent. But that's assuming they feel well enough to participate and that they're able to do the work that is required. So we certainly don't want to put students in this position, or their parents, that they've got to keep working even if they're sick. But in this case, with the new rules related to the COVID-19 virus, if a child is out for those 14 days, they will be able to fully participate in school and not be counted absent. Are there going to be any changes made to how lunch is distributed? Will the grab and go meals happen during the school year for students? Again, that's a question mark for us right now. We're looking at best practices as we determine how to run our schools and as we determine our protocols. I think you can see the pros and the cons of both ways. All of the adults on our medical advisory committee did tell us kids need to move. They need to be out of the classroom. We can't confine them to one space as a protective measure. They may need to go to the cafeteria or not. Again, we're still looking to determine what student movement will look like throughout the day. So that's a question that will be asked, that will be answered in the near future. Another member asked, what would a typical school day look like, the time and schedule wise? Once again, lots to come on that. I can't answer that specifically today. Lots of information will be shared on that later in July. Deanna, I'm going to come back to you for this next question. Can you specifically describe how online instruction for the 2021 school year will meet students' needs for hands-on learning, higher level learning, collaboration with peers, project-based learning, and required instructional time with teachers in the virtual setting? That question's coming from one of our parents named Angie.
Yes, sir, Dr. Dupree, and thank you so much for that question, because that has been something that, again, our students have been missing. In a natural face-to-face learning environment, there is rich discourse between students. There is high-level questioning and interaction between the student and the teacher, and many opportunities for students to work together on projects and so forth. And so with our online platform, we're engaging in the use of tools such as Microsoft Teams, so that teachers can provide a similar experience in the synchronous environment. Again, those synchronous times will be scheduled specifically during the day. They will be live with the teacher through a video conferencing platform via Schoology, and students will have an opportunity to interact with each other, work on projects together. Teacher delivering lessons either through direct teach. We can use breakout rooms in a synchronous environment as well, so that teachers can work with students in small groups. Also, students can pair up together or in small groups to work on projects in breakout rooms. So those are the things that we envision in our online platform to mirror what a student would experience if they were face-to-face in a live classroom. We also want our teachers and are working in terms of our professional development for our teachers to engage in the use of our checklists and our rubrics with kids, so that they understand if they're given a project and they're working together with other students on that project, that there's expectations via a rubric and some checklists. So again, their learning is visible and they can constantly check for their understanding. So these are the various things that we'll do to up the rigor in the online platform.
Deanna, the next question comes from Kendall Q, another one of our parents. She says, I'd like to know if families who elect to have their students return 100% online will receive traditional grades as those who attend in person. I think it's important that grades remain consistent regardless of how instruction is delivered.
We absolutely agree with that. And as we move forward in the fall for the next school year, we will be employing the grading practices that were in place prior to COVID-19. We have our board policy EIA that addresses grading along with administrative procedures, and those will be reinstated as we go forward for the 2021 school year. We will utilize standards-based grading with the grade levels that were engaged in that prior to COVID-19, which were pre-K students and first grade students. And then 2nd through 12th grade will continue grading practices with numerical grades. Schools and grade levels that were engaged in the grading pilot will continue as well. So we will reinstitute our grading practices.
All right, Deanna Courtney R., another one of our parents, is concerned about out classes. She's asking, what is being proposed for out class, library, PE, music, and art at the elementary school level?
Well, and we're going to go back to the similar structure that we had in place prior to COVID-19. So in a face-to-face setting, students rotate through a schedule through their out class structure. We will mirror that through synchronous and asynchronous learning opportunities with our students in the online platform, so that they'll rotate via a schedule through all of their out classes over the course of the week, just like they would in a face-to-face environment.
All right, now we're moving on to CTE, Career and Technical Education. Kathleen W. says, please consider allowing students to do a hybrid option if attending Reese. They need to attend Reese in person since many of the programs are hands-on to earn certification, but allow the rest of the school day to be online for families who want to limit exposure.
And what I would say is CTE is a very high priority for us in our school district, and the learning experiences that students need to engage in many of the CTE courses may require a hybrid option for us to consider. And so, as Dr. Dupree indicated, we're working through several details that may be unique to certain courses in terms of instructional delivery. But we're also looking at face-to-face options, technology simulations, web-based opportunities, and most importantly, we'll continue to engage with our businesses so that we still have opportunities for our students to engage in internships, whether it's through an online platform, partnering with businesses, or if there's available internships for them, because we know that real life experience is the key to the CTE experience for them in the learning environment. So we'll be working and exploring through all of those options to provide a robust learning experiences for our students.
Very good, thank you. I'd like to ask Dr. Dina Hill, our Executive Director of Student Support Services, to join us at this point. We have a few questions that I think she's best equipped to respond to. The first question, there you are, Dina. Good evening.
Good evening.
So Angie H., one of our parents, asks, can you describe how you will implement high quality instruction to students in regular education and for those who receive specific program instruction like bilingual, ESL, special education, dyslexia interventions, and GT?
Yes, well, thank you, Dr. Dupree. And Angie, that's a great question. We've heard tonight already several strategies of how we're going to be providing high-level instruction for all students. In addition to students, I want to talk a little bit in answering this question for students with special needs. We know that as we design the curriculum for our teachers, we also provide examples for our teachers to assist them with supporting the diverse needs of our students that have accommodations, that might have language supports, as well as students who require curriculum alternatives, such as our students from Gifted and Talented. In order to ensure that we have that aligned, that our curriculum is aligned, we also will be training our campus administrators on some different tools to use in the online environment in order to monitor the fidelity of those programs. In addition, we'll continue with our face-to-face monitoring tools and provide feedback to our teachers to ensure our students are making progress and that our parents are being notified if we have any concerns with student progress.
All right, so Dean, another one for you directly related to special education. How will special education services be maintained to meet the goals and requirements outlined in the student's IEP so that it doesn't interfere or take away from the shortened classroom instruction time? For example, the same amount of hours and in-class support.
Well, thank you so much. And we have heard from many of our parents that have students serve with special ed services concerns and questions about how will we do things different for their students. And so we want you to know that we're planning to have an ARD meeting for every student prior to the first day of school. Once the learning model is determined and the calendar is set, those are the items that we need to discuss in an ARD meeting. If the parent chooses for their child to be online or in a traditional face-to-face model, we'll need to talk about, are there extenuating circumstances that are related to the student's disability that we need to make changes to the instruction to ensure the student makes progress. For example, in the online model, as Deanna talked about, students receiving daily synchronous instruction, we may need to make some adaptations for some of our students with disabilities because they may need to receive that kind of learning differently. In addition, all of our special education services, we know for students that are online may not benefit. And so we may have to talk about other alternatives. As we think about the face-to-face model, Dr. Dupree mentioned we may need to bring students in slowly and do it in a cohort fashion to ensure that we're practicing social distancing. Well, we'll need to talk about how might we need to do that differently for students served with special ed services. Do they maybe need to come into school from day one because of their needs? Do we need to do things differently as far as social distancing? And what do we need to help them with in order to keep themselves safe and the staff and the other students safe in the classroom? So those are just some of the things that we'll be doing differently. And you'll be hearing from our staff. If you're a parent of a student served with special ed services, you'll be hearing from the schools sometime during that week of the 27th about an ARD, if not earlier.
I appreciate that. I do want to kind of follow up a little bit because I know, our special populations are a group of students. We've heard a great deal from their parents over the last few months because even, our GT parents are really special learners as well. And so what I heard you say is we're going to have systems in place to make sure the GT students have their needs met, their individual learning plans, the various things they do to extend their learning in new and unique ways to meet their unique learning needs. But I also heard you talk about special education again, and we've talked about, I know as we're planning that for our special education students, and you mentioned this, Dina, that it may be necessary to have them full-time in the building to the best of our ability from day one to make sure that they're really protected and that their learning is brought forth. Is there anything else specifically about any of the special populations you'd like to share?
Well, one of the things that I wanted to talk about is once we do define the calendar, it's going to be critical for us to have that information to finalize plans. For example, you brought up the GT population. We know that there may be There may be things that students could do during the intersessional calendar that maybe they don't need intervention because they're already mastering the curriculum, but would that be a great time for them to work on some of their projects in which they choose and help them go into deeper learning for things that they really desire to do? So we're talking about that, and we are waiting the final decisions on the calendar to talk about how can we make learning for students that receive GT services better during this school year. And we know that we really struggled in the spring as we moved to the online environment. So we're committed to doing better for all of our special programs.
And I appreciate that, because I know that's so important to our parents. It's important to the board. It's important to all of us. So I appreciate your leadership in that area. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Want to come then to another area where we're hearing a lot of questions right now about fine arts and athletics. What are some prerequisite plans and expectations for fine arts, specifically choir, band, and orchestra, as we plan to instruct safely? So the bottom line is all of our extracurricular and co-curricular programs, like fine arts and athletics, those teachers are going to have very specific protocols about how to engage. Everything from marching band, that's going to take some special protocols, to students being in a choir. You can't stand shoulder to shoulder on the risers. So yes, the teachers will be well trained in specific protocols. The goal being to provide the most robust program we can to help the students learn all they can, have the full experience of performance, again, on the field and on the stage or risers, to the best of our ability. As you may know, we've already closed, though, our strength and conditioning camp for athletics because we continue to have outbreaks, as did all the other districts in the region. At this point, all districts have closed those camps down, which for us has helped us to see again how critical it is to have good protocols in place, because we had what we thought were strong health and safety protocols in place, yet we still had exposure to staff and students in those camps. So this is something we're going to have to keep working on. We know marching band is scheduled to begin. Our fine arts leadership camps are scheduled for July. But just know we will continue to keep our students and their parents well informed of those protocols and any plans and modifications related to that programming. It is important to note that the guidance for a lot of that comes directly from the University Interscholastic League, UIL, and theirs will be based on what TEA and the governor publishes. So again, as they publish new information, we will keep you informed and apply their guidelines in our district. This is an area that it's very challenging to give specific answers to right now, because honestly, we don't know what volleyball, football, cheer, choir, band, or any of that is going to look like as the fall begins. But we know we're committed to putting on the best program that we can. I want to turn to the staff and teacher concerns, and there's a number of questions that we've heard. Kara H., one of our staff members, says, will FBISD modify each classroom to include plexiglass around the teacher's desk? Will class sizes be reduced so that we can place our students 6 feet apart? I've addressed this a little bit. There will be square footage allocations. So yes, we will manage student enrollment and placement in each classroom. We're actually still talking about the use of plexiglass around the teacher's desk, or around the reading table, if you will, or around student desks, because we know so many of our young learners in particular learn to speak, they learn their vocabulary, they learn reading skills by the teacher's modeling. So we believe we will have to use some form of barrier so they can still see each other's faces and engage in that way. But we don't know yet if that will be face shields, if it will be plexiglass, but we'll have all of those details worked out. Another staff member asks, will my sick days be impacted if I have to stay home after testing positive for COVID-19? So the straight answer is yes, they will be, just as if it were the flu. One of the things we're hearing again from our healthcare professionals are that it's a virus like the flu is a virus. So we do expect you would have to use leave time if that happens. Another reason, we want to keep you safe. We don't want you to have to use that leave time. I would also remind you, though, there's a great deal of information on the district website right now, because some of the federal relief acts provided additional leave for those who were affected by the virus, who have childcare issues and are at high risk. So you need to familiarize yourself with those options in the event you are exposed or have to go into quarantine, or if you are diagnosed. Catherine K., another one of our employees, asks, will teachers have the option to stay home and teach remotely? A family member that I live with has autoimmune disease that puts him at higher risk for severe illness if he contracts COVID-19. I'm also concerned about passing the virus to my elderly parents. I'm fearful to return to the classroom for the sake of my family, as well as my students and their families. So yes, Catherine, we are mindful of that. And as I mentioned, your health and safety, your well-being, and that of your family is a top priority for us. But the answer is this. Yes, we are going to provide many of our teachers who need the option to teach remotely. They will be allowed to do so. Now, I will also tell you, though, it is not likely we will be allowing teachers to teach from home. What we expect to do is set up classrooms and special access points into the building that would allow teachers to come and go without contacting anyone or being exposed in any way, and teach from their private area that's dedicated to their teaching, so that they have full access to the resources and the things that they need to deliver quality instruction. But we are going to minimize and completely mitigate, to the best of our ability, any need for a teacher to teach from their home when it comes to this fall. We just believe that being in the professional environment overall improves the quality, but we also believe we can set up infection control protocols that will eliminate your contact with others and keep you safely engaging with students remotely from a location in one of our buildings. As I look at this, I see employees fall into three categories. Today, they fall into the category of those who are ready, willing, and able to come to work. They're ready to get back. We have those that fall into the can't category. And that's what I hear you talking about a little bit, Catherine, is the idea that you're at high risk and you have family members that are high risk. So you're in that can't, and we need to help you find an option that allows you to still perform your job without that risk. And then there's the ones who won't, out of their own fear or concern or anxiety. And that's different than a can't, because they may not be at risk, they may not have family members at risk, they just have fear and they want to protect themselves. Again, we want to help you be protected. We're going to serve your needs, but we're going to have to talk about how we can find a mutually agreeable way to meet your needs and allow you to continue serving the students in your classes. So there's a lot of one-on-one conversations we're going to have in that area, in this domain, about what each individual's unique needs and concerns are, so we can find the right solution for each team member. I'm high risk. What type of accommodations will the district make for those who are at high risk? I think I've just addressed that. We're going to work with individual employees to meet their needs and minimize their risk. One employee member said, if I get sick with COVID-19 from either a student or fellow staff member, will our district insurance cover medical bills at 100%? Will the district expect employees to sign a liability waiver? No, we're not going to ask anybody to sign a liability waiver. However, I would also say we're not going to pay for your health care, just as we don't if you contract the flu. I mean, it's kind of almost becomes a running theme each spring that the flu is going through buildings, and we have students out and we have teachers out. So in many ways, the virus it's a virus like the flu. And so we're going to ask you to protect yourself. We're going to protect you, but we're not going to be able to cover, in the insurance, we will not cover 100% medical bills if you happen to contract it. The other practical aspect of that is really, we would not know where you contracted it, honestly, because it's impossible to know if you got it at a grocery store, while you're out at a restaurant, somewhere else in the community, or from work. So it's impossible to pin down where you may have gotten it, you short of very, very tight tracing, which generally is not something we're going to be able to do for each diagnosed case. I have another employee question. I work in Fort Bend ISD, but my children go to a different school district. Will the district align their calendar and procedures with districts in the area so that I do not have to worry about my commute or childcare? So I'm going to tell you, I have spent hours and hours on phone calls and Zoom meetings with other superintendents in our area, all of our neighboring districts. We are all working very closely together, but this is a situation where we're all probably going to be doing different things. There'll be some similarity, But for example, one district has already moved their school calendar to start school on August 2nd. We're not starting to the 12th. Others won't start till later in August. So this, unlike many other circumstances, this is something where the local community needs and desires, such as our survey feedback, has come in very, very different. It's been expressed very differently and uniquely based on exposure and needs in the community. So we are going to be working, as I mentioned earlier, with our extended learning program to try to help support teachers with childcare and extended learning opportunities, even during the day, if at all possible, where we can. We're also talking to local childcare facilities. They need to understand our situation and how teachers might need that level of support. But just know we're doing all we can to stay aligned with other districts. But in the end, we each have to make our decisions based on our unique needs and values of our community. So it is going to be more challenging for staff who live and perhaps have children in other districts, or you have children in our district and work in another district, that there's going to be some very unique facets to this that we're going to have to work through very carefully. We're going to support you to the best of our ability, but there may not be a perfect solution for many of these issues. Final question is, with the hybrid model, will teachers be responsible for teaching the hybrid model students and the students that opt for full online learning as well? So the answer is, again, what we're trying to do is we're trying to respect our teachers and their well-being. We know that a teacher having too many preps can be overwhelming at the secondary level. We also know that teacher load at the secondary or elementary, having too many students for education that you're educating and grading for, can also be overwhelming. So we're trying to manage load and we're trying to manage number of preps. That might mean there's a teacher who's teaching the same class online and face-to-face, but with one prep. And within, you might have a load of students that's manageable overall between online and face-to-face. The other option we talked a lot about, what some teachers doing only online, but every option we considered required them to have 4 or 5 preps, which can also be very challenging, we know. So just know we're looking out for your well-being. We're going to try to manage very carefully your load and your number of preps, and still allow you plenty of time for planning and preparation for what you have to do. So that's some of the work you're going to see in the calendar modification, is giving you that time to do that work. So you could do both, but just know we're going to try to minimize that so you have one thing to focus on, even though some might be asked to carry a little extra by doing both, but we're going to give you the time and the resources to do that. So with that in mind, that's our last formal question. As I mentioned before, we received hundreds of questions, but all these questions, we read every one of them, we went through them all very carefully, and all of them have been represented to the best of our ability in what we've addressed tonight. I'm looking at the chat and the questions that have come through. Some are asking, so I'm going to start here. Let's see. Kathleen is asking us, along with providers helping out from Houston Methodist, are you involving pediatricians from Texas Children's Hospital? They focus on pediatric population. That's a great suggestion. We will definitely follow up to see if we can engage some pediatric specialists in our work. If none of the 4 individuals working with us have that knowledge. Ellie is asking, any chance of switching platforms for online education that is more user-friendly? Yes, we are considering options right now. Again, many more details to come, but we are exploring what other options might be available for our students and their parents and our teachers that might be more user-friendly. Taiwo asks, what about STAR, and when are we going to know when we get promoted? That you may be speaking about last year. At this point, all students should have heard their status, so you need to call your principal to ask about that if you're not sure of what your promotion status is for the next school year. STAR was not administered in the 1920 school year. At this point, the commissioner has indicated he does plan to go ahead and have STAR be administered in the 2021 school year. Sean is asking, will you be using UVC lights and HEPA filters to decontaminate air in the HVAC systems? I don't know that specific answer. What I do know is we have excellent protocols that we had in place The products in our cleaning systems, even before the pandemic, they sanitized and disinfected for the coronavirus. I do know that, but I will definitely be passing this question along to our operations folks to see if there's anything we need to do further in these areas. Sean, thank you. Amy's asking about transportation. Transportation is one of the most important topics right now because we have many students who ride a bus in this district. And if we have social distancing rules around bus transportation, it could significantly limit the number of students that can be on a bus at any given time. So this is something that is a limiter that we're going to have to work through. We may, as part of the pre-registration, ask parents if they are willing and able to drive their students to school to help manage and provide the busing for the students who most need it. So just be thinking about your family and what your transportation needs are. If you're a student who currently rides a bus, do you have the flexibility, the ability to drive your student to free up space on the bus for those parents who do not have that ability? So be ready to answer that question during pre-registration. Logan is asking for different learning models. How does the district teacher prepare the students for the STAR test if it will not be waived for the next school year, especially for the coming third graders? Deanna, would you like to answer that question about STAR preparation, especially for our third graders?
Yes, absolutely. And that's a great question. As I indicated, in the spring, the online platform was very different. And as I described in responding to the questions associated with the online platform, we're really mirroring what a teacher would be able to do in the face-to-face environment, and working at providing all of the tools and mirroring the same experience through the online platform. We'll continue to use our curriculum as we develop lessons and deliver those lessons, whether it's on the online platform or in a face-to-face model. We're going to continue to use our REN 360 data, beginning of the year, middle of the year, and end of year. As Dr. Dupree indicated, as we think about staging students coming face-to-face in the building, we may ask our students who are in the online platform to come in to take their diagnostic assessment and then go home, and we'll continue to use that data to inform our instruction regardless of what platform the students are in.
Thank you. Logan has also asked us what extra sanitizing measures are going to be taken with high contact areas, for example, desks, bathrooms, cafeteria. Of course, we will have very structured protocols around those things, more details to come in the future. And then the last question, which I think is a great question to end on, Sonia, one of our students, asked, what can I do to keep myself prepared for the next school year? So as superintendent, here's my answer. You need to be reading just lots of different books this summer. Stay engaged in thinking, challenging your mind. Just read and think about the skills in our profile of a graduate. If you go back to those 7 attributes, be thinking about how you can be motivated and confident in the school year. Reflect on how you feel about yourself today, how you feel about others, how you're engaging with others. Be ready. Look at your mindset. Do you have a growth mindset? Do you have a fixed mindset? Are you what Simon Sinek calls an infinite player? Are you always ready to grow and thrive and change? Or are you a finite player that plays by rules that you always have to win or lose the game? So Sonia, I thank you for asking that question. I don't know how many students are listening, but for our parents, students, and staff, we are all in a situation as we begin this new school year where we need to be infinite players. We need to expand our thinking. We need to be nimble. We need to be flexible. We need to remember that life is ever changing and life is ever filled with uncertainty, and how we deal with it is what counts and what matters. And for Fort Bend ISD, that's what our profile of a graduate is intended to do, is to help our students live a real full life that is filled with obstacles and challenges and lots of winning, some losing and failing along the way, picking themselves up, thriving and growing every single step of the way. So with that in mind, I think that's a great close. Deanna, thank you for your time. Dana, thank you for being with us. And to everybody who helped put this together, thank you. And thank you for being with us this evening. We appreciate you. We appreciate your partnership and support. Have a great evening, and I'll see you the week of the 13th. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity, Dr. Dupree.
Good night.
Good night.